I am most happy to be with you this evening as you celebrate one of the greatest visionaries and leaders of the 50s and the 60s, whose words still today are read, shared, listened to over videotape, radios, televisions, iPods, Nooks, and Kindles. The man of which I speak is the great Martin Luther King Jr. And today we celebrate Martin Luther King Jr., his life and legacy of being a man who brought hope and healing to America. How many of you remember when he uttered these words? "We who engaged in nonviolent direct action are not the creators of tension. We merely bring to the surface the hidden tension that is already alive." I do not pretend to have been to the mountaintop, but I do proudly boast that I have vowed to fight injustices and to work diligently to protect the civil rights of all citizens, regardless of class status, color, creed, or sexual orientation. I too seek that all children and adults will enjoy the privileges guaranteed under our Constitution. And as a result, I am currently serving in my fourth elected term as president of the Pittsburgh unit of the NAACP that was established in 1915 in Pittsburgh. I'm the first woman president to be elected to serve also. Thank you. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People is the oldest, largest, and strongest civil rights organization in the United States. More specifically, the principal objective of the NAACP is to ensure the political, educational, social, and economic equality of minority group citizens of the United States. The NAACP is committed to achievement through nonviolence while relying upon the press, the petition, the ballot, and the courts, and is persistent in the use of legal and moral persuasion, even in the face of overt and violent racial hostility. 100 years after President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation and freed the slaves, African Americans were still denied many of their civil rights. Because of this, the NAACP was formed, insisting that all Americans be guaranteed what the Constitution promised: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The NAACP has as its mission the goal of eliminating racial prejudice and removing all barriers of racial discrimination through democratic processes. We seek to make the public aware of the ills of the world, strategies of correction, and paths to reductions of these ills. Unfortunately, sometimes we lose sight of the real meaning of working together for the benefit of the whole, or building a real sense of community. Have you ever seen the behavior of crabs that have been placed in a barrel? All want desperately to get out of the barrel, yet when one crab looks as if he's getting further than the rest, the others reach up to pull it down to their level. As a result, none of the crabs ever get high enough to escape from the barrel. It is this crab at the bottom of the barrel mentality that pervades the thinking of many individuals and undermines the success of our communities. And a close cousin to the crab mentality is the "I've got my own, so you get yours the best way you can" attitude, and that's a terrible attitude. In this formulation, a single crab has managed to get to the top of the barrel, but instead of sharing strategies for success with his or her fellow crabs, the triumph crab remains the only species of its kind in a high position. While it is nice to have a successful crab in the family, with no putting of mechanisms in place to help others reach high positions, the single crab's success will make no difference for the liberation of the crab community. Many remain still stuck at the bottom of the barrel. In either scenario, the success of the community depends on working together in a way that allows all members to be lifted out of the barrel. In this formulation, individuals pursuing a path of upward mobility share a common interest in reaching back to give a hand to help others up. even as they climb towards success. In addition, organizations and groups that are working together a common goal form partnerships and coalitions that draw upon their collective strengths to achieve shared objectives. Great strategists like George Fraser and Dennis P. Kimbrough call this approach networking, linking people and organizations together in ways that create a human and institutional chain of connections that can help advance individual and community success. If one were to look back on history at every major social advancement in the United States over the past century and a half, they would find that these accomplishments depend upon the hard work of a collective group of individuals and organizations that form coalitions, the ultimate networking strategy to achieve their social goals. For example, the civil rights movement depended upon the strategic tactics of various individuals, such as Martin Luther King, Fannie Lou Hamer, Dorothy Height, Roy Wilkins, Thurgood Marshall, Whitney Young, and organizations such as the NAACP, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the Urban League, and the National Council of Negro Women. Let us ponder some of the words of Martin Luther King Jr. that we can think about as I continue.
The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy.
We must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope.
Nonviolence means avoiding not only external, physical violence, but also internal violence of the spirit. You not only refuse to shoot a man, but you refuse to hate him.
In our glorious fight for civil rights, we must guard against being fooled by false slogans as right to work. It provides no rights and no works. Its purpose is to restore liberty and the freedom of collective bargaining. We demand that all be stopped.
The cruelties of slavery cannot stop us. The opposition we now face will surely fall. Because the goal of America is freedom, of peace and scorn though we may be, our destiny is tied up with America's destiny.
Thank you, students, for sharing the words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The role of the dedicated individual should not be ignored in the networking equation. When individuals in positions of power possess a collective we philosophy, they are able to work in tandem with others to advance a larger agenda. Yet, too often, just like the crabs, individuals or groups get into power and they have no allegiance to anyone other than themselves. And even though their opportunities may have been built on the shoulders of others, they refuse or are incapable of understanding their role and responsibility to help others. This me mentality is particularly troublesome because positions of power usually bring with them great resources and expanded opportunities to change or influence the status quo. Unfortunately, there are too many examples of individuals who have achieved great success who exist in self-centered silos that prevent them from working with others in a manner that promotes collective empowerment. In order to reach a point where a community can plan strategies for success that maximize networking opportunities, and this is what Martin Luther King was about. It's about togetherness, working together, because we are our brother's keeper. Its members must first define the nature of the problem or problems that they share in common. For many populations, the common problems may be poverty, hunger, failing schools, unsafe neighborhoods, inadequate housing, drugs, and preventable chronic illnesses, or all of the above. Once these problems are defined, community members must develop a common agenda that lists the problems and propose solutions, include anti-poverty, affordable housing, community development, and community health programs, among many other proposals. Whatever the goal or set of objectives, therefore, members of a community can experience a set of common circumstances that give them a vested interest in defining an agenda that can address their predicament. When problems are defined and an agenda is shaped, members of the community must also realize that they need each other to move the agenda forward. As had been previously stated, the efforts of a single individual or a few individuals may be needed to build momentum, but it will not be enough to carry the agenda to the finish line. Since everyone has a stake in the success of the agenda, from elected officials, citizens, and business to social activists and associations, a community will need to build up on the core strengths of its members in order to further the cause and make a positive difference. It is important to remember that a fundamental requirement of networking and coalition building is community involvement. It's fine to have a grand plans for change, but at the end of the day, it is active participation in community events that will provide building blocks for successful networking. The people you meet, the skills you build from becoming active in your community will serve you well in your efforts to influence leaders and implement change. For you, your community is the St. Vincent population and surrounding community. You must use your power of networking to volunteer your services and talents at the college and in the community. Do not sleep your life away. Become active. You are energetic at your ages. You are lovable and valued. Leave your imprint. When you see inequities, try to think of ways to erase them. Recruit others. A team approach works best. For over 100 years, the NAACP has rescued people of color from the rooftops of discrimination, economic peril, and social injustice. But our job is not done, because there are still people waiting to be rescued. There are children standing on the rooftops of their schools waiting for an education that will carry them through the doors of opportunity. There are senior citizens standing on the rooftops of hospitals waiting for a healthcare system that is easy to navigate and provide real assistance. There are mothers and fathers standing on the rooftops of their homes waiting for someone to step in and rescue their communities from the crime and violence and death. We must join hundreds of others who publicly go on record to declare that we must stop tolerating the senseless shooting in our neighborhoods, our communities, in our city. Our communities must come together in complete support of re-educating our youth about the value of life and the importance of family, crisis intervention, and professional counseling when thoughts of harming others become acceptable behavior. We must band forces to redirect the psyche of a killer. We want to make sure every individual has the opportunity to live life to the fullest without the threat of any individual taking your life. In my mind, I see the signs our people held during Hurricane Katrina. They said, "Help us now, save us now." Those signs are still present. I see Troy Davis holding his sign saying, "I am innocent, don't kill me." I can see Jordan Miles saying, "I am going to visit my grandmother, don't beat me to a pulp." Those signs are still present every time a person of color or anyone is denied the opportunity to excel, or every time a child is denied the education she or he deserves. After all, equal education is a civil right. In fact, every time an elderly person cuts her medication in half to make it last longer, we see the signs raised. We cannot continue to ignore the images. We must listen to our conscience and protect and defend the very freedoms we take for granted. When I listen to my conscience, I hear the call of the courageous men and women of this organization who marched, preached, picketed, and fought long and hard to provide this generation with the many freedoms we enjoy today. When I listen to my conscience, I hear a call to service. My conscience tells me that now is not the time to lie down. My conscience tells me that we must wake up, for to whom much is given, much is received, and required. My conscience is the conscience of this nation, and my conscience is the conscience of the brave soldiers of the civil rights battles of the past 4 decades. When I listen to my conscience, I know that my mission is clear. For some, we have allowed our culture to dictate our conscience rather than our conscience dictate our culture, and I will not allow this to continue. A mother once told me that if you do not stir the pot, your broth will settle. The NAACP is here to ensure that the broth does not settle. We do not settle for second best. We are close to achieving equality, but close enough is not good enough. We will not settle for second-class citizenship. We will not settle for 1 or 2 black members of the United States Supreme Court. We will not settle for voter intimidation, racial profiling, hate crimes, and erosion of affirmative action in today's society. The role of the NAACP is to ensure that the broth does not settle. We still continue to stir the pot and trouble the water. This organization will keep the waters troubled, for it is through troubled waters that we will work together to find calm seas. What could you do to help stir the broth? Be like the Pittsburgh NAACP unit. Join in the Stand for Freedom, march or a similar march. Take part in a proactive voter awareness initiative. More specifically, mobilize the St. Vincent communities to recognize the possible threat of the institutionalization of a voter ID challenge. You cannot prepare to fight if you don't know the problem. It costs anywhere from $10 to $40 to get a state ID card and or driver's license. Not everyone has a valid driver's license or needs one. Sign petitions to let your legislators know that you do not support the passage of a bill that would make it harder for citizens to vote. And I do have a petition here that we would like to take to Washington so that we can stop this bill so that everybody has the right to vote, as it should be. They should not have to have a state ID or driver's license in order to vote. And there is also even a suggestion that students not be granted the right to file absentee ballots. And you would have to bear the expense of returning home to vote in order not to be disenfranchised, and this should not be. Students have a hard enough time having money to get home for the holiday or whatever, and we're talking about voting in November and then to go back home for Thanksgiving just to vote. So we're very adamant about trying to keep this bill from passing. And there are plans afoot to move voting poll sites to make them inconvenient and non-approachable for seniors. Help educate people about these plans. Sign petitions to send to your legislators to urge them not to allow these actions to occur. Contribute to programs and partnerships like the innovative partnership between the NAACP and the Duquesne Law School. The partnership yields a positive outcome for law students who participate. This partnership has allowed local Pittsburgh citizens who have no money for legal representation to attempt to have their claims cases of civil rights violations heard. We must learn how to better respond to bullying, personal rejection, and negative group identification and rituals. We have heard too many moms and dads cry over the last 10 years to last a lifetime. We only chant, we must take back our neighborhoods, we must stop the senseless gun violence. Instead, we must learn how to live lives that will yield the answer to these chants. Now is the time. Now is the time. As I close, I am reminded of an African proverb about a band of elephants crossing a river. As they were traveling across the terrain, they came upon a river. The big elephants did not have a problem stepping into the rough, conservative waters. However, there were some very small elephants in the group who were afraid to step in the water. Now, elephants, as you know, are known for their stellar memory. As this movement was taking place, somebody at the middle of the river shouted to the front of the line to those who had crossed over and said, "Brother leader, we have some folks still standing on the banks of the river who haven't made it into the water to cross over." How many of you have some rivers in your life that you think are uncrossable? While viewing the situation, the leaders of the elephants didn't call a town hall meeting. They didn't write a government grant. and they didn't seek any congressional legislation. The larger elephants turned around, got back in the river, and stood shoulder to shoulder, allowing their bodies to create a dam that parted the waters to allow those little elephants to cross over to dry ground. The moral of the story, once you make it and get to the other side, don't forget to remember to turn around and get back in the water and help someone else across on dry ground. This is the end of my speech. I also want to reiterate on how happy I am to be here to talk with you. And I would like to thank my volunteer quote readers for doing what they did for me. And I want you to remember the words of Martin Luther King Jr. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. This is why right temporarily defeated is stronger than evil triumph, unquote. And that came from that great man. I wish to thank all my hosts today. The dinner and fellowship have been a wonderful experience. May God bless each of you on this day and in the future. And in addition, may many blessings be bestowed upon the entire St. Vincent community. Thank you.